All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Tracy Sprower with Met How at Home. This is one of our programs from Get Ready and ways to be proactive in accepting and embracing the opportunities and challenges of being human and growing older and aging in place with dignity and grace, as we say. And I'm really looking forward to this program today. We met Diane Miller this spring. Betsy and I did a book group, Reimagining Death, and it was just a really deep and beautiful conversation. And Diane, you just brought so much, as well as Sherwin, who's joining as well from Olympia. They're working on creating a village there. So thank you so much for being willing to share what you've been doing with the Ethical Will Legacy Letter Project process. So inspiring, and I think all of you will be in for a treat. And for the folks that are joining us watching the video, I hope you enjoy as well. And Diane, I'll let you take it over and introduce yourself.
So I'll start with the slides. And my background is in public health and Zen Buddhism. And both of them prepared me for examining your life and for impermanence. The other things that prepared me to think about an ethical will, Sherwin and I were part of a group who met for a couple of years to talk about death and dying. And we prepared our advanced directives together. And that was really helpful in terms of getting all the stuff lined up, but it didn't really answer the question about my life. It talked about my death, but not my life. And then the next thing that prepared me was sitting with friends who were dying. And those friends who had been reflective, who had done some writing, who had really thought about what their life meant, they were able to live in the moment those last months. And one more thing, I was part of Providence's Advanced Care Steering Committee for people getting ready to do their advanced directives. And one of the questions there was, what are your values? You were going to be making your decisions based on your values, but most people haven't thought about what they are. And so that got me thinking too about how to think about values, how to write about your values or talk about them before you're in a ICU bed. And then finally, doing my own ethical will. It was just surprising how much I didn't know about myself. So let me go through what I want to accomplish today, and then we'll see what you want to do, and we'll come together with what our agenda will be. I'd like to do introductions and ask you some questions about what you know about ethical wills and have you started one or not. And then I'll go through the components, or at least the components of the way I did it. And then I'll show examples of ethical wills or legacy projects that another group of people that I'm working with, how they're doing it. And then we'll go through a detailed walk of the components, and I'll leave you with some resources. And I told Tracy I will send her a bunch of information about background on this and examples and books. So if we could do introductions now. I'll change the screen in a minute, but as we go around the room, I'd like to ask you if you have a will, if you've completed your advanced directive and reviewed it, if you completed it a long time ago. Have you ever started a memoir? What spurred you to come to this talk today? And is there something on this topic that you want to make sure that I address today? So I'm going to stop share screen. And then if you can introduce yourselves. Tracy, why don't you start?
Okay, that sounds great. And then I'll just call the person's name that's next, and then maybe if we could just go that way so there's not confusion as to who's going when. So yeah, I'm Tracy Sprower. I've been working for Met How at Home for coming on to 4 years. I really cannot believe that. And I think one of the things that interested me the most about getting involved with Met How at Home actually is Deirdre was telling me that who was kind of the original backbone of the organization, that they were working on this advanced care planning. They're trying to get a grant to just do a campaign within the community. And that really interested me because I have just borne witness in my own family to people having sudden deaths and just being left with like no directions, and seeing the way that that affected everyone left behind. And so I've kind of chipped away at my own, trying to get my own ducks in a row. I have not written an ethical will. I did do a class called on funeral celebrancy, and so I wrote like my own eulogy, which really was just like a love letter to my people. And I did get to talk some about my values. And so I just, yeah, I'm just open to whatever you and our group here is interested in today. And with that, I'm going to oh, and my own advanced care plan, I have to say that I've had a lot of shifts and changes in my life in the last few years. And so it's been really tricky to figure out who my new POAs are and just like commit to that. And so I'm still in my own process, you guys. And so I'm going to pass over to Greta.
What about a will? Have you done a will? Tracy, did you do a will?
I do need to finish. Sorry, I do need to finish that as well. That was on my 2023 list of resolutions. So I'm a typical person that will like probably slide in to finish the end of. Greta, do you want to go ahead and
Yeah,
introduce?
you're blipping out a little bit for me, so I just wasn't sure you were finished. Okay, so yes, we have done our wills. My husband and I have done our wills and directives, and they are about 7 years old. So past time to review. We've had a lot of I won't say a lot, but a few wake up calls as far as whether we have the information or not doesn't matter so much as who knows where it is, and how are we even going to notify that person. So we have just a neighborhood of 6 of us, and we've known each other forever, but we don't have all the contact information of what if something happens? What do you want to have happen? And we did some caregiving. One of the spouses had ALS, and so that required some attention to how does that process work, and how does the broader neighborhood participate in helping with that. And that brought up a lot of questions. And just the question of an ethical will, I think, is really interesting to me, just because we, like I said, I think we tick all the boxes, and yet I don't know that. I know I would like to do my dementia directives, and I also feel like I just have questions about, especially for my husband, like what does he really want to do? He doesn't talk about these things very much, and it's very hard to get him to even discuss it in a general way. So I would really like to get a process. So we talked about doing a process for the neighborhood where we at least were going to collectively work on some of those boxes so that the lists of contact information and bank accounts and all that stuff got organized enough for us to find it. And then really to try to maybe use that as a springboard for maybe some of the harder topics.
Mhm.
That's great. Jocelyn, you're next on my screen.
Thanks, Tracy and Greta. I'm real pleased to be part of this group. I got interested in living wills as a nurse in our community for the last 25 years. I've been retired for 8 or 9, and I was trying to help people with their living wills in the context of my 10 minutes that I was allotted for doing the intake, and there was never enough time. And even doing follow-up phone calls, I never had enough time to actually address the advanced care planning. So when Tracy's group got interested in doing advanced care planning through MedHow at Home, I was able to join the group, and it's been so satisfying to have the time and to have the conversations with our community members. And I've had a couple of friends in my close friend group who have died in the last 5 years. And that was a real wake-up call for me, recognizing how much work there was to do to get them ready. And both of them were ready. They had cancer, they knew what was coming. And I was able to give them a little help with that. We are working on our wills as we speak. We have a last couple of appointments in December and we'll be done. But we did finish our living wills and our powers of attorney. So we got all of that information collected very recently. But I was not part of any of the groups that did obituary writing, and I haven't done any memoir writing. So this is a new thing for me.
And is there anything in particular you would like me to address today?
I'm not even sure what an ethical will is, so I'm open.
Good.
Sue.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, I'm Sue Yates. I live over in Kirkland, so I'm very glad to be joining you in that beautiful place you all live. Going down the questions, I do have a will, was done, freshened up last spring, and all the power of attorneys are there, and I have an advance directive, and there was a new form filled up in my doctor's office that kind of doubled on it. So that feels pretty good. I am doing a sort of memoir. I'm involved in a program called Storyworth, where you just write recollection. You probably know this, in sort of book form over the course of a year or more, as in my case. So that has been a time of reflection. And the other thing I did was years back on a kind of vision quest kind of thing. There was a time called Ceremonies of the Night, where we envisioned our own death, who would be there, who we wanted there, what would be around us. So, and what would happen with how we would be our final bits laid to rest.
Yeah.
And how and by who, with whom. I guess I'm here because I have the question for today is, what the heck is an ethical will? I have no idea, but it sounds good. I've been reading, I guess I'm looking for some help in getting deeper into the book called A Year to Live, and sort of focusing on this part of my life. So that's my question for today. What is an ethical will? Is it about your assets, or is it about your advance directive, or both? Thank you.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Jocelyn. Yeah, I'll let Diane answer as we go along. And next is Sherwin.
So in answer to Diane's questions, they're yes, 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 and yes. Although I think my ethical will is different than Diane's and was written at a different time in a different way, but I think it still qualifies as an ethical will. But a couple of caveats just as we're talking about this. So my wife and I did our wills together, and then my wife died 2 years ago. And one of the things that I found was really helpful and important was the way the will was written. When she died, I got back in touch with our attorney and I said, what do I have to change in my will in terms of next in order, in terms of taking over for power of attorney and medical directives? And that was written into the will appropriately so that my daughters take over in those roles. So I really didn't have to do anything different with my will after my wife died, which was really helpful. Another caveat is that Diane and I, in doing this and processing this with our little Sangha group, I talked a lot with my kids, and they've seen a lot of the things that I've done. And so I don't think there are any real surprises for them. But one little piece of that is Diane, who lives close to me, and my kids live farther away from me. Diane's sort of the in-between person. So we sort of serve as each other's healthcare advisor and sort of a conduit for my kids if something were to happen to me, which is, I think, really helpful because Diane knows more my present thinking day by day, week by week, and that's been a real plus also and real comforting. So yeah, I think that's it for me.
Great to have you back, Sherwin. Thanks for being here. And Claire Ellen.
Number is 509.
Hi, multitasking here on a medical appointment. There we go. My answers are yes, 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 and yes. I'm pretty much a do-it-yourselfer, so I did all those things myself, including a revocable trust with a pour-over will. And I have been taking a memoir writing class and enjoying it a great deal. So when I heard which I don't know what it is, I was hoping that I would be writing something very separate from my will, which had to do with my values and my ethics.
Good. Oh, God. Okay. We're on track. we're all on the same page here. So I'll go through some specifics of what's in an ethical will or what can be in an ethical will and some background information for you. So you know that a will is a testament by which an owner of property disposes of his assets or her assets at the time of death. But your life's meaning is more than that. And I really like what Andrew Weil said about what an ethical will is. It's you want to leave something behind and to be remembered. It also gives you a chance to understand your own values and share your ideals. It gives you a chance to learn about yourself, to accept mortality, and create a way to live on, something that will be there after you've died. And this is the most important part for me, this last bullet, the immediate sense of worthiness, completion, and accomplishment. So as you go through reviewing your life in whatever way you're going to do that, at the end of the process, you've seen what you've done. And it's pretty incredible. And if you want to share it, you can share it. But if only you are the viewer of this ethical will, it's still worth it. And if you're willing to share it with your friends and your loved ones, you reach an intimacy that is pretty intense. It's pretty wonderful. I use this particular graphic. It's something that I saw it was an very long art piece at the Bainbridge Island Art Museum. And the artist took her grandmother's journal and blew it up and then put over it embroidery to represent the synaptic connections. And so it's really tight and everything's working at the beginning of her life or at the beginning of her journal. And then by the time she's elderly and she has dementia, everything is frayed. And it was an inspiration for me to make sure that while my brain is still tight and the synapses are working, that I am able to get everything down on paper. So these are the categories that I used, and I got them sort of intuitively. This is what made sense to me. And then as I looked at books that are entitled Ethical Will or a Legacy Letter or the Forever Letter, these particular categories came up. So the first one, and I think this is pretty important, is to state why you're doing this. State the day, the time, and the place where you are and why you're doing it. I did my first one in 2013 and I reviewed it every year. And it's just interesting to go back and see what still applies. But by making it immediate, by saying, I'm sitting down today and it's Halloween and the kids are coming for trick-or-treating, when you read it later, it gives you a better sense of who you are, who the writer is. The next category are to list your personal values. And you can do this in a number of ways. And I'm going to send Tracy a list of values that 3 different religions, Judaism, Buddhism, and Christianity, have used. I personally think it was better for me to come up with my own definitions of what a value was. But you can do it either way. And those values are the guideposts in your life. And so how do you know that how did I know that simplicity was a value for me? And did I live it? I may have said those words, but did I live it? The first go round when I did this, I had social justice listed as a value. And for that time, it was true. But in the last 10 years, I've not really been so involved. And so I've taken that value off of my list of values. Another category that you can work with, and this is another way of looking at values, is what did you learn from your spiritual practice, your religion, or from any other group that passed values on to you? So your family, your community, your church, what values did you inherit? And then to play with, how many of those did you accept? So a value that my parents passed on to me was family, not one that I accepted. Family turned out not to be an important thing for me. And so there are things that society tells you that you should do, that you should value, but you may not. This is the most fun, the next section. And it's different than memoir. And memoir could work here too, but this is the way I did it, is just to write splashes of memory. Just let things come up. And you'll be surprised when you look back, on your review time a year later, how much that intuition of a memory actually made sense to you. So for me, my very first splash of memory, and the one that I keep coming back to, was a day swimming. I was by myself in an Olympic-sized pool at UCLA in December, and it was raining, and swimming and then having the rain come down on my back and being alone. It was just such a I don't know. It was such an intense visceral recollection of what my body was like. And so I'm giving that as an example, that you don't have to say a story about what happened to you in third grade or the day you got married, but it's what comes up. And if you do 20 of those, you'll start to see a story coming together. Then here's this one's you start to get into things being a little bit harder. Forgiveness. The physician Ira Byock, who started the palliative care in the Providence system, wrote a book about the 4 things that are important to do before you die. And those 4 things are to make peace, to talk to either write and do it in your mind, or do it in person. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. And a couple of people, Sherwin's wife added, I'm proud of you. And that's a hard one. So as you think about the people in your life who are important, some of your unfinished business, you can make a list of the people and start to talk to them, start to write to them in a way that you're having a conversation with them. And then if there's any unfinished business, any hurt, write that you ask for forgiveness. And that write, I love you. It actually makes a difference. Another part that's hard, and you may not want to have this in your final document, you might want to keep it in your journal. For me, it's still in the journal, is dealing with the hard stuff, the losses, the things that the path untaken, the mistakes that you've made, the things that you thought you would accomplish in your life and you didn't. And it's worth putting those out there, because things that you think were really big may not be so big. And just by writing about it, you might be able to find some closure with those things. And then this is my favorite part, the last part. It's the blessings that you're going to leave. What bequests? So you've left your kids your house, you left them a car, you left them a bank account. But what are the emotional things that you want to leave people? One of the things that I have in mind is the love of a dog. And it may, for you, it may not be a dog. It may, may not even be a pet, but something in your life that has always given you joy. Think of the things that give you joy and pass those on. Think of them as gifts wrapped up that you would be giving to someone. So I call that the ethical will. And you can do this in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, I'll just stop at that. Okay, so here's what mine looks like. I then put it in a book, and it's an accordion book, and then each page has a different section. Some of them are about the blessings, the little bits of memory seltzer that came up, and then I put in photographs. And it's really, if you can, and if you enjoy this, pull all of your old photographs together, have them scanned. And if you don't want to scan them, if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, I just sent mine to Scan Cafe. And then as you go through the photographs, things will come up. There'll be memories, but there'll also be photographs that you'll choose to include in your ethical will. It adds an extra something to it. Now, this is how I did it. I'm working with a group of artists, and they're taking it in a whole other direction. And so I guess I'm telling you this part so that you know you don't have to follow any kind of formula. You can do this in whatever way your heart takes you. So this woman, Pat, is using handmade paper and her artist paper. And then you see her chapters are done by the places where she's lived. And so she follows all of the categories that I've laid out earlier, but then she organizes it differently. And then she's in her, and then she's putting it in like a pirate's chest. And so she'll have a different kind of book for each category. And for the people that she loves, she's doing like a little tea bag book. So it's going to be a book that's maybe about that high. And she'll have a little story about that person in the tea bag. Jan is a very unusual artist, very creative. Oops. And she is doing hers as a garden. And she started hers 3 years ago, and it's a labyrinth. And there are 10 different stations. And at each station, she has a thing that tells about her or that she asks the viewer to think about. And I'll just read one to you really quickly. This is station 6, and it's a bathtub. It's an old trough, and it's filled with water. And the sign says, "Look into the water. There you will find submerged plant life, slimy pond biota, and one bright, charming goldfish who is always eager for a little snack. Let this be a reminder that we are all part of a closed system called Earth. We, like the goldfish, are dependent on something outside ourselves. That something takes many forms. We could not exist without all the various forms. We are also dependent on the force within ourselves, our desires, hopes, dreams, and need for purpose. Turn and walk a few steps behind and ring the bamboo chimes." I mean, it's so her. I could never do something like that. It would never even occur to me. But she's somebody whose hands are always in the earth. And to have this be her ethical will, I think is just beautiful. Another person is Chinese, from a family of 11. And Chinese people often do not talk about death, and she has not been able to get she's uncomfortable doing it. So what they've decided to do is to have each member of their family is going to write a family recipe. And then they're going to tell the story of how the times in their family where they had eaten that meal, and the values that were passed on from their parents, and the values that have been passed on from each other. But by doing it as a recipe book, she's able to get them to talk about death and who they are as a family, rather than going in directly. So these are examples, and there's so many different ways that you can approach this. This page is just telling you some of the things that you might, if you want to do this project, and however way you want to do it, some things that you might want to prepare to set up. For me, it was helpful to imagine a perfect setting, a place where I could call the people in my life, the people I loved, and or the memories of perfect days or the memories of perfect places, and to have an imaginary conversation and some closure. And the place that I picked, hopefully you can see that. Okay. It's the Big Sur Inn, which is a funky old place on Highway 1 next to Big Sur. And it just reminds me of a perfect morning spent there. A morning going in to get coffee, and it was probably about 6 in the morning, and it was foggy out, and the fire was going, and classical music was playing, and it was the perfect breakfast morning. And so I think of that as a place where I would like to write about these imaginary conversations with the people I love. And also in preparing on a tangible level is set up a box, a basket, a file drawer, a bedroom drawer, where as you run across things in your house, or as you think of something, write it down and just put it in the drawer. And if you're really organized, put it in a file within the drawer. And so that when you sit down to write, you're not starting from scratch. You have some background information. And start collecting. And you can start a draft early and always fill this in later. And then there's an exercise called stepping stones, and I'll send more information about that, as well as sending information about Natalie Goldberg. But the stepping stone exercise is to think about your life and think of maybe 7 important moments where you made a decision, or if it wasn't a decision, you entered college, you got married, you quit the job that you thought was perfect and you didn't know what you were going to do next. And then kind of draw a path between all of those stepping stones. And it gives you a way of understanding who you were that ended up making that life-changing decision. The Natalie Goldberg exercises, and we'll do a couple of those. The Natalie Goldberg exercises ask you to free write in a timed way, either 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So there'll be a prompt, and without letting your hand leave the paper, you just write whatever comes into your mind. And when you look at it later, it's like your brain has been opened. You didn't have to think about it. It just popped up. Okay. So that was just a way of getting started. Another category, if you wanted to go at this deeper, or if you wanted to go at this from another direction, is to write about the people in your life who were important and how you interacted with them. It's a way of, there are some people who do not want to be the center of the story. It makes them uncomfortable. Or they end up writing, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that, and it's really boring. But if you write about the people who were important, you write your story without getting in the way. And so I did one about Sherwin's wife. And so she had a very interesting life, so it was easy to write about. But then I took a day that we spent together, and what happened on that day, where we were, what the day looked like, what we talked about. And then so it fills out who I am, as well as it filled out who Bronwyn was. And then when Bronwyn was dying, I felt that I had given this to her, and she had a chance to know what my feelings were. And I also had a chance to know that I had given her a gift before she died. And some of the people who would fall into this category might be close friends like Bronwyn, but they may be somebody that you just met for a short period, but they helped change your life. They taught you something that you didn't know, that you didn't know you were looking for. And the same thing with the sense of place. I have about 10 places that I've written about, and they're not places where I've necessarily lived, but they're heart places. They're places where something important happened, or I long to be there, or it was one of those mistakes that I didn't live there, a wrong decision that I didn't choose to live there, and still my heart goes back to it. And or you can think about the first place where you lived and how your life, how that place actually kind of molded your life. So there's different ways of doing it, but you can tell your story by talking about place rather than saying, I did this, I did that. And then another way of working on this is to do a timeline. And so for me, 1944 to 2024, what were the big events that were happening in the world? And then where was I? And so where was I when John Kennedy was killed? Where was I during when the towers came down? Those are big, but where was I, or what was I thinking during the Vietnam years, especially the early Vietnam years, where I didn't really realize what was going on, and then how did that change for me? This is really a fun one to do. It takes a little bit of research, but in doing the research, it's like going back in time. So I did, what were the popular songs in the 50s? What were the popular books in the 50s? What were the books that I read in the 50s? So more on getting started. I'm just checking time. Start writing, however you're going to do this, just start writing and start collecting. Set up that file drawer, get the photographs, and talk to people, and tell them you're doing this, and maybe they'll want to do it with you. So doing it with someone, there's a synchronicity that happens, and it becomes easier. So if you don't want to write, and the idea of putting together some book just feels like it's too complicated, you can do a collage. What I had on the first page, this is a collage of all of my IDs, my driver's licenses and school IDs and passports. And it's easy to do. And looking back on it, you just, oh, I remember that. And look at those different hairstyles. And what was I doing then? But it's a fun little art piece. You can do a scrapbook. And in a lot of these legacy books or ethical will books, and some of the attorneys, actually the legal profession, is suggesting that people don't put this off and do a video instead. That would not work for me. That would be too hard for me. But for people who have the ability to speak from their heart without planning, it's a really lovely way of telling your story, being able to mention the people that you want who are going to be watching this video. And there's no reason why you can't do a video and do other things. Another technique, and especially if you're going to be working with people that you've lived with, is to draw a floor plan of a house that you lived in. One of the artists that I'm working with did this. She had 5 sisters, and they grew up in Southern California. So she drew the floor plan, put in the furniture, and put in everybody's rooms. And then when the sisters got together for a holiday, they all talked about well, no, it didn't happen this way. I had this room, and then they talked about sharing clothes, and they talked about what they learned from their parents, how they learned to cook, the first boyfriends, but it brought in their life story, and it gave them a way of working on it together. Another thing that you can do, and this is also pretty easy and fun, is to collect maps of the areas where you've lived and then annotate them. So Tracy went to school in Olympia at Evergreen. So she could take Evergreen as Olympia as one of her maps, put in Evergreen, where she lived, the boy that she was dating, where he lived, where they went out to breakfast. And you can kind of tell your whole story by a map of one particular area. I kind of talked about the historical timeline already. Another artist did a beautiful book. She made a list of, her brother-in-law died, and she was very close to him. She made a list of his 100 favorite things, and then made them into a very large book, but not as a list that I would do, which would be a word processing list. She did it all with letterpress, and then one thing was laid over another, which was laid over another, and so you really couldn't read them completely, but it was like that was his life, how all of his things intertwined. Telling your story through a garden, we talked about that. And another way to start is to work with a couple of friends about identifying what your values are, and then talking about them. So I did this with a friend. We did a Musar study, which looks at Jewish values, and for a year each week we took a different value and wrote about it. And these particular values: compassion, equanimity, enthusiasm, faith, generosity, gratitude, honor, humility, loving kindness, moderation, order, patience, responsibility, silence, simplicity, trust, truth. So we would write about them, and then sometimes we'd have to write about them for a couple of weeks. But in taking a value like compassion, which I thought, this is important to me. It turned out it wasn't all that important. Order was important. And silence was important. But the more I wrote about it, the more I understood about why those particular values were important. And in that particular kind of study, you also write about the shadow side of a value. How does the negative side show up? And then identify what values you received, and then how many of those are you going to be passing on? So the values that came from your family, from society, how many of them did you accept, and how many would you want to pass on? So now a little bit of your turn. Okay, let me just start. Any questions? I didn't see any hands. I was watching. So any questions or comments before you do a little bit of homework here? Sherwin.
And go back to slide number 4.
Okay. Yep.
So I would just like to make a comment as a psychologist who's worked with people the end of life and survivors of people, that the forgiveness, the Ira Brock, and I think Ira Brock does have the "I'm proud of you" as one of his 4. I would encourage you, each of you, to do that soon. That is one of the most regular things that comes up when I see people where someone has died, is unfinished business. And not hearing those words from a parent or loved one, they're proud of them and that they forgive them. And I think that's extremely powerful. And so, yes, I think it belongs in the ethical will if that's the kind of ethical will you do. But even if you don't do some of these other things, I think that's a really important component to finish with people that are loved ones to you. That's it.
Sure. I have a question on that. I've been doing it kind of in a pretend way. I mean, I imagine the person and I have the conversation with them and I write to them. I'm not doing it in person. And that obviously makes sense for the people who have died, but for I feel like I'm more honest when I do it that way. Any comment about that?
Well, I mean, what I did when I read that book, which was back in Germany when, Bronwyn and I were back in Germany, is that I read that book and I was so moved by it that I sat down and I wrote to both of my daughters, and I essentially went through the four things and I mailed that to them.
Okay.
And then we talked about it afterwards. But I think that's important and some way to communicate it with the person, whether it's verbally or written or somehow conveyed that they know it.
Okay. Hard. Anyone else have a question or a comment? Okay, let's have you write. We'll do a 3-minute free write. And you have a choice which question you want to answer. And I'll time it. Describe a time in your life when an important value was formed. Why is this value so important to you? And for me, it's interesting to know which ones came from childhood and which ones came later in life. Or you could write, what is the most precious gift you have ever received? Was it an actual gift? Was it words? Was it an experience you shared with someone you loved? Why was this gift so meaningful? You do not have to write incomplete sentences. No one's going to see this. You can share if you want to share, but I just give you a chance to just see what comes up on a timed write. So 3 minutes. Okay. Just finish your thought. And is there anyone who feels comfortable sharing? Oh, good. Oh, good. Thank you, Claire.
So I wrote my stepfather, who not only never threw anything out and was also a dumpster diver, held up a found item and said to me, "Someone made this and it has values and it can be repurposed." Already saving my own stuff to see what I could use it for in the future, thus began my recycling ethic and eventually the founding of the Meta Recycle Center.
Oh. Wow. Blessings to him. That was lovely. Jocelyn, are you? I looked like there was a maybe.
Yes, I wrote about time spent with my father, and he was very busy. We had a very busy household, and my mother was ill. So a lot of time together as a family was centered around our mom. She was wonderful. She was a great mom. And but this was time, he was the one who would stay up and wait for us, for the girls to come home from dates. So this was a time where I had my father's undivided attention, which was rare. And we had these great philosophical questions. Like I remember asking him, so how do you decide who you want to marry? How do you decide who's a good person? And he talked to me about knowing people long enough to see how they handle adversity. Do they grow from mistakes? Do they take on challenges in life? Do they run away? And how helpful is he to you or you to him? So that was a really special time, and I hadn't realized it that much when it was happening. But looking back, I value it very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. I think these are examples that you don't have to work that hard. The stories are there. All you have to do is say 3 minutes and just let your hand do the story. And anyone else? Okay, Sherwin?
My 3 minutes. Being on a small boat out on the ocean with my father, halfway between land and Catalina, the sense of wonder and connectedness to the ocean, and in looking back, the connection between me and my dad. What a gift. Mornings and days that followed where I spent on the water. Now, how I value nature, especially the time near water and the ocean. What if my father had taken me to ball games instead of taking me out to the out of doors? That's
So
it.
interesting, we have 3 fathers. Maybe he's sitting down there somewhere saying, hey, what about me?
I have another father story.
Oh, good.
I just scribbled because I'm aware of this already, so I had time to put a lot of words down. So let me just share quickly that walking into the living room of our house, my father is seated reading a newspaper. When he sees that I'm there, he puts down his newspaper and looks at me expectantly. It gave me such a feeling of being valued and seen and cared for and loved, which were not things that I tended to pick up from my mom. So from a dad who did not have a lot of ways of expressing his care, this was a tremendous image that I can replay as often as I need to.
To be seen.
Like yeah.
Yeah.
I love all these memories. I didn't get everything down, so I'm going to speak mine as well. But mine is the thing that popped up into my mind is gratitude has like really been one of those touchstones in my life that I hang on to it. You know, when stuff gets really tough, I hang on tighter than ever to gratitude and just looking for those things to be grateful for. And I I just have this memory of driving home. My grandmother and she would take me along shopping, and she would always be like, okay, you know, you have $2 to spend, go on into the toy section or whatnot. And she'd go do her shopping and then come back for me. I was maybe 7, something like this, 6 or 7. So I just really came to expect that $2, you know, was going to be coming my way every time. And sometimes I would kind of, you know, prod for, can't I have more? You know, I want this Barbie and it's $3.50 or whatnot. And so this one time we were driving back, and this is kind of I don't know, every other week or something. I was really spent a ton of time with my grandmother. And she pulls over on the way home, pulls over to the park and looks at me, and she's just like, honey, you know, I just I haven't heard you say thank you. And I'm just seeing you focused completely on more, more, more. And you know, it doesn't feel very good to me to try to give to you if it's not being appreciated. And I just remember, you know, that just really sunk into me at some sort of a deep level, that my focus was going in a direction that yeah, that was not beneficial for our relationship, or for her, or for myself. And so yeah, thank you to my Grammy for
What a gift.
no, thank you for like always giving me so many plastic toys all the time. But yes, definitely. She so rarely had a crossword, and so it was just like, whoa, I came to attention.
Greta, did you want to? You don't have to.
Yeah, sure. I'm more comfortable with making a recording, speaking out loud, so that's what I did. And I'll just say that looking at my life, the biggest gift to me has been my opportunity to have a spiritual practice. And the way that resonates at this moment is just that sort of trust but verify, that we're given many opportunities to, especially as children, but certainly as we grow up, we're opportunities to try on different things to see what's true for ourselves. And that's not something we're necessarily encouraged as young people. You know, we're told to do what we're told, but that doesn't always work for us. So that whole idea that you can have your own experience.
So I will send all sorts of information about this to Tracy, and she'll make it available to you. And do you put it? Do you have a section on your website, or will you send it to people?
Yeah, I will just email everyone who registered for this class. And I think that I will include it, you know, in one of my larger get ready emails. I might save it out for my advanced care planning theme that comes up in March, April, to just, I've been taking notes on this fantastic presentation, and because I think it's, yeah, what a rich exercise for anybody at any time in your life, you
Yes.
know. I mean, like I said, unfortunately, you really don't ever know when we're gonna how long we have here. So it's no matter what our age. I'm gonna bring this to my kids even too, because I just think that what a great exercise to do at different times of your life too, and just be able to watch your changes. So yeah, I'll send the information to the group, and then also I'll figure out how to share it in a larger way. And we don't have a resource section at this very second on our website, but eventually it would be great to add that.
I'm glad you mentioned, when you do an ethical will, or however, whatever you're going to call it, in whatever form it is, set some time up for an annual review. Mine is Thanksgiving. And you may change it or you may not change it, but have it be, don't let it just sit in your drawer. And by taking it out yearly, you can also see what changes there have been in your life. And is there something you want to add? Is there something you want to take away? And to Tracy, anytime you have a group of people who want to do this or want to do it as a support group, I'm available. This is my new passion. So anything I can do to help people do this, because it just makes you feel so good. Okay. Oh, yes.
I wonder if
I think, yeah, Sarah Ellen.
I wonder if some sort of follow-up, I realize we were a small group, but that's a workable group, to have another Zoom where we're actually doing some of the parts of it together, or whatever you think of as a way to do it, the parts that are appropriate to do together.
I'm up for it. I'll talk to Tracy and we'll see kind of what kind of day hour we could put together. And yeah, if there's interest, I'm there.
Yeah, and were quite a few more people who did sign up, and there were some folks who wanted to come. And so even if they weren't able to attend this, then yeah, maybe we could have a nice size group of 4 to 7 or something like that. I love that you're interested in following up, Claire Ellen. So yeah, let's talk about that, Diane, and we'll see who else might be interested, because I think, yeah, just getting the momentum going is a big piece of it. And yeah, thank you so much, Diane. What a wonderful presentation. Anything from anybody else? Any last thoughts or questions to share here?
Diane, I assume your contact information would be part of this?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate your excitement and passion. That's a good boost for the rest of us to jump in somewhere.
Good. And start small. If it looks, what I presented was big. It had many parts. Let's just start with one piece.
Thank you, Diane. You've given us a real gift.
Thank you.
Yes, appreciate it very much.
So sign off now. Okay. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, end the recording.